Hi, welcome to lecture 2, and what we're going to be looking at is our study on obedience. So we're going to be looking at what obedience is, and we're going to look at our main key study, which is by Stanley Milgram, and we're also going to be looking at explanations of why people obey. So our key studies that we're going to be using is Stanley Milgram, Hofling and Rank and Jacobson. So first of all, you need to know the definition of what obedience is. Again, you don't have to remember word for word, but you need to get something about a direct order and somebody who we think is in authority, so authority over us. You can also, if you have trouble defining things, sometimes you can also use an example. For example, following an order from a teacher because we think they have authority over us. Going on to our key study of obedience, which is Stanley Milgram, which most of you should already be aware of. I'm not going to read it out for you. I'm just going to leave it on the screen for a bit. But what I've done is I've summarized it as much as possible in terms of aims, procedures, findings, conclusions, criticisms, and strengths. I'm not sure if you can see the strengths there, but it just says laboratory, high control, reduces extraneous variables. But you're going to see exactly the way I've written it in lecture 4C. Yes, I've actually written out these essays in full. So what I've done, I've just done a basic information for Milgram. So pause it, make sure you get those in your notes, make sure you really know this study because again, like Ash, you can use this study for the rest of social if you wanted to. This is my key study number 2, which is Hofling, which is a more naturalistic setting, as Milgram's was in a laboratory. Hofling was in an hospital, which emulates what really goes on in real life. So nurses obviously won't be pretending, or they won't be affected by demand characteristics. This study, as you see, as you see how I'm going to write it in my in lecture 4C, it actually supports Milgram's original study, and it shows that Milgram's study can be taken out of a laboratory because 95% of these nurses did agree and give patients an unknown drug from an unknown doctor over the phone, and it was like double the dosage that they were supposed to give. Yeah, so this now suggests that people will um, accept or follow orders from somebody who they perceive to be an authority figure. And finally, Rank and Jacobson, again, they just replicated a Hofling study, but this time the nurses knew what the drug was, and the nurses had some time to consult with other nurses. And we found out that 89% of those nurses refused to give the drugs to the patient because they knew the effects of Valium and they knew that what can happen if you overdose with Valium. So this just now shows that if we're allowed to consult other people in particular situations and we have knowledge about particular things, like these nurses have knowledge about the drug, they're less likely to obey. Okay, so very key. There's a third key study here. Um, what we're going to look at is explanations of obedience. Now, they're going to give you loads and loads of different explanations in a textbook, but they will never ask you to give more than 2 different explanations. So we're going to do a bit of cheating here. Just learn 2. If at max, if you don't feel comfortable, learn 3. And as you can see here, I put agentic shift and legitimate authority more or less in the same one. Okay, so gradual commitment, if you want to explain, the first explanation is how if we do small requests for people, we're more likely to accept other requests until we don't actually know how big the request is that we're doing, because we'll be like, oh, what's another request? Oh, no, what's another request? A bit like if your friend asks you to borrow her pair of shoes, or your pair of shoes, for example, and you give her a favorite pair of shoes, and then she says, oh, your earrings will go really nice with it, so you give her your earrings. Oh, your belt will go really nice with it, and then eventually you've just given her your whole wardrobe because she's asked for really small requests. So because you think, oh, I gave her my shoes, oh, I gave her my belt, what is one more? You kind of like don't know when to say no. And they've kind of said this is kind of like what happened in Milgram's study, because he made them start off with 15 volts and go up by 15 each time. So you're thinking, oh, what's 15 more volts? I've already given them 35 volts. What's another 15 volts to that? What's another 15 volts to that? And that is why they said that people went up all the way to the 450 volts. The next explanation is agentic shift. A lot of the times we see ourselves working on behalf of somebody else, usually an authority or legitimate authority figure. So if we're agents of something else, we move from our automatic or autonomic state, that is working for ourselves, to our agentic state, that is working on behalf of somebody else. So it's not really us doing it. It's um, it's doing it for somebody else. So it's because what this explanation says is we keep moving in between our agentic state and our autonomous state. And if we're following direct orders, because we're in our agentic state, for example, everything that we do is not our fault. It's because we are doing it for somebody else. Okay, and then legitimate authority is one of the simplest explanations to remember. It's just basically we perceive others to have legitimate status over us. For example, a police officer, they might have the right type of uniform, or they might have the right type of badge. Therefore, we feel they have authority to arrest us and tell us what to do. So we believe that their authority is legit or legitimate. And that is it. That is all you need to know. So make sure you go back, you look at the so obviously you know what obedience is. You look at the three key studies. So Milgram, if anything, the most important key study, and then you've got Hofling et al. As your supporting study, and then Rank and Jacobson. If anything, know the first two, especially Milgram. I started to see, if you started to see a pattern here, that psychology is a lot about the research that goes into it and what it finds out, how it supports these particular types of explanations. So our next lecture, what we're going to be looking at is key examination questions, looking at Milgram and explanations of obedience, and looking at about how to go about answering them.